The Russians have carried out their act of retaliation and have already reported on it. Trump has gotten himself into a new scandal with his statements about Ukraine. And Elon Musk has launched a real war against Donald Trump and is pushing a case that could cost Trump the presidency. And in that case, there are such secrets that many people will feel uneasy. Meanwhile, drones over Moscow will soon become an everyday occurrence. And also Gnilovlad and Tikhomorhau artificial intelligence envisions Putin. We had a conversation with him, and that would be at the end of the program. There will be a lot of interesting things. So if you're new to this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So Russia launches 407 drones and 44 missiles at Ukraine at night. They struck almost all across Ukraine. Unfortunately, there are fatalities and injuries, and the fatalities are rescuers who were extinguishing a fire at the site of one of the strikes. As Trump said, "These must not be allowed. Young guys are dying just like your own children." Yes, that's right. People just like that are dying. But how exactly he's not allowing this, we'll talk about that a bit later. But look, for the Russians in this retaliatory strike, it was important to get as many of their Tu-95s and Tu-160s in the air as possible to show like you, Ukraine, didn't destroy anything here. Here they are. They just took off and struck you with cruise missile SUR. Well, part of our nuclear triad, our aircraft inherited from the Soviet Union. Do you know how many of them they managed to get in the air today in total? There were 6 Tu-95s and 2 Tu-160s. In 2023, I specifically checked the statistics. Russia would send up 20 or even more aircraft to strike Ukraine and would launch over 120 cruise missiles. So after scraping together everything they could following Webb, after the brilliant Webb operation, all they managed was 6 Tu-95s and 2 Tu-160s. Well, and the blow of retaliation. So what kind of strike of retribution was this? They targeted the energy sector, they hit facilities they consider to be some kind of production sites. But what do we have at this point? A strike on a hotel in Lutsk where the Ukrainian national track and field team was staying, a strike on a high-rise in Solominka, on civilian infrastructure, on the railway, and even on metro tracks. So I haven't missed anything in this so-called terrifying strike of retribution carried out by the Russian Federation. Nevertheless, today at 5 in the morning, I was walking out of the shelter and met an entire family with children, with backpacks, with sleeping mats, as well some coming from the metro, some from other shelters carrying pet carriers, with cats, with dogs, and some just carrying them in their arms. The children had their own little backpacks, and some were holding their favorite toys. All in all, they were sleep deprived but not broken. That's what it all looked like. The children had such serious faces. And I think to myself, who do you think you're going to break, you empty-eyed moth? Who exactly? You know what his main mistake is and what will be the final nail in his coffin? The fact that he suddenly thought that Ukrainians would react to events the same way most Russians do. By the way, I'd also like to remind you that today is the second anniversary of the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. It was the largest man-made disaster in Europe since Chernobyl. So whatever Putin does, it always ends up as some kind of disaster. Whatever he touches, it all gets worse, falls apart, turns into some kind of decay. And in almost every mythology, there's a character like that. Whoever or whatever they touch, they drain the life out of it, turn everything into decay, everything around them dies. And at the end of the program, I'll tell you about our discussion with artificial intelligence regarding the concept of touch. It's called this, the touch of decay and Putin. And it's going to be very interesting. Well, let's get to the main news. Trump compared Ukraine and Russia to fighting children. So, well, you've probably heard this news. Sometimes you need to give them a little more time, Trump said. He stated, here's the full quote, yesterday when I was speaking with President Putin, this was, the day before I gave him this analogy. Sometimes, and maybe this sounds pessimistic, but there are times when two children are fiercely fighting in a park. They hate each other, they don't want to stop, you try to separate them, but they won't let you. And then maybe it's better to let them fight a little before breaking them up. Trump said, I told this analogy to Putin and said to him, Mr. President, perhaps they will have to keep fighting and suffering because both sides are suffering before they can be stopped. Moreover, he not only used the example of children, but also brought up a situation in hockey. He said that sometimes before separating hockey players, they're allowed to fight for a bit. Well, yes, that does happen in hockey, but the players aren't separated to make the show more spectacular. Just think how messed up you have to be to say, well, sometimes you need to let them fight for the sake of the show. So he's comparing this war to a kid's fight, to hockey. How do you profit from the show? By the way, let me remind you, Trump hosted the show The Apprentices on NBC for 11 years. And in that show, he played the role of the boss. It was precisely this show that shaped his image as a supposedly successful businessman. Although in reality, that's not true at all. Well, just so you understand, it's like how on our TV, they made Tishenko out to be a successful restaurateur, Kolya Tishenko. So Trump's idea of peace in 24 hours has now shifted to let them fight a little longer. What's frightening isn't even that he said this, but that he explained it to Putin as a justification. Like, you need to fight it out, sort things out, and so on. And now, regarding this analogy, I will simply remind you of his own words, Trump's words. New York Post, February 25th, this year. I hope this ends. People are dying every day. This war is so terrible in Ukraine. I want to put an end to this I want to put an end to this damn war. And all these people who have died young, beautiful people, they're like your children. Like 2 million for no reason at all. People are dying every day. Then he also said, he described, Vladimir, stop. 5,000 people are dying every day. So let's just let them keep fighting. Let another 5,000 die every day. I mean, how messed up do you have to be for that? But that's not all. Trump stated that the US could impose sanctions on both Russia and Ukraine. Quote, when the moment comes that I see we can't make a deal, that this won't stop at that point, that this moment, said Trump, it's in my mind. We will be very tough, but it could affect both countries. It takes two to tango. So basically, yes, both are to blame. Of course, not Putin, who attacked and doesn't want to end the war, doesn't even want to agree to a ceasefire. But both sides, I've already said repeatedly that they've blurred the word aggressor, blurred who actually attacked. Both sides, both are to blame. Let it be, it takes two to tango. Enough already with this, it takes two to tango. Everyone keeps running around with that phrase now. It takes two to tango. But if you impose sanctions, you'll see how Putin will dance the tango all by himself, do the splits, and even do a backflip if you just snap your fingers like this. So it's just a way to avoid taking responsibility. Like these ones don't want to, I'm not satisfied with either side. That's it. But they want to avoid responsibility, but of course still get the benefits. And these, it takes two to tango types. You can't catch a fish without working for it. So just going around quoting proverbs, sprinkling them around, basically he's just distancing himself, which is obvious. But, and do you remember the famous phrase it was said in, I checked this with she, it was in both a cartoon and a movie. The one who hinders us will help us. So someone has really, really big problems. Not just someone, but specifically Donald Trump. American media are reporting on the consequences of the conflict between Trump and Elon Musk, which has now become completely public and caused quite a stir. He says now this is going to be a real bombshell. Do you know why the Epstein tapes were not fully released? Because Donald Trump is on them. And he wrote, "Have a good evening, Donald Trump," and hinted that he, Elon Musk, has access to this inside information. I just think he hinted at it, but he's not making it public. I mean, are you all out of your minds over there or what? The Epstein case is just absolute madness. This is one of the most high-profile and mysterious scandals, sexual scandals connected to human trafficking, the involvement of minors, and the participation of influential politicians, millionaires, and even members of royalty. So, very briefly, in literally 2 sentences, what is this scandal all about, and why is it so shocking that Donald Trump's name comes up in it? Epstein is a financier, a multimillionaire. He was friends with everyone there, with Clinton, with Trump, and with Prince Andrew. But the true origin of his wealth is rather murky. Chronology. So when they started investigating, it turned out that Epstein was bringing children to his island, and well, I won't go into details here, but horrible things were done to them there. And when all of this came to light, and it turned out there were dozens and dozens of such cases, Epstein was arrested, and he made an extremely scandalous deal with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to a minor charge. He served 13 months and received immunity. So in other words, it was basically a technicality He served his time, got immunity, and for all subsequent cases, even if they were very serious, was immune from prosecution for those as well. And he received immunity from federal prosecution for himself and his accomplices. This was in 2008, I should remind you. The prosecutor at the time was Alexandra Costa, who later became Secretary of Labor under Donald Trump. And in 1919, the case was reopened under pressure from the press. There was new evidence just absolutely horrific and deeply disturbing. They found thousands of photos of minors at his luxurious Manhattan mansion, as well as a secret room with hidden cameras. In short, it was just utter madness. And on August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead, but under rather mysterious and suspicious circumstances. He was in a cell. In the cell, the cameras that were recording suddenly, inexplicably, weren't working at that moment. The guards who were supposed to come by every half hour fell asleep and didn't come. And in general, after that, when these facts suddenly came to light, people started saying that Epstein was eliminated because he had compromising material on dozens or maybe even hundreds of influential politicians, businessmen, and celebrities, not only from the United States, but from all over the world. That is, this gave rise to various theories. He created this network using minors, compromised people, had cameras everywhere, and the cameras were recording. But how did he compromise them? You'd have to be brainless yourself to fall for that in the first place. So he was recording, let's put it this way, using minors, and his various recording rooms, he collected compromising material on all these politicians, and in this way he created an extensive blackmail network. And one of the most high-profile threats, according to Elon Musk, he'll briefly summarize the gist of the Epstein case, was that it turns out these tapes related to Epstein were not made public because Donald Trump's name appears on them. Well, at one time, Trump called Epstein a good guy, but then they apparently had a falling out over some real estate dispute. But this is a very painful blow, an extremely harsh one. So if Elon Musk now digs in his heels and starts using the money he spent on Donald Trump's election campaign to discredit him instead, given his resources, his influence, and the fact that he owns the social network X, formerly Twitter, well, that would be very, very serious. And another one of Trump's threats was that he would halt the mission of the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, which delivers cargo to the International Space Station. Immediately, Steve Bannon, a Trump ally, spoke out sharply and said, "Let's seize SpaceX by midnight with a presidential executive order." Well, in short, it was a real and significant clash of wills, truly remarkable. And according to the latest information, Politico reports that Trump's aides suggested Musk should tone it down, and today, on Friday, they have a phone call scheduled to discuss the situation. Well, Elon, you'd really better watch your back and definitely beef up your security, because Epstein, by the way, there's actually another theory out there that it was, in fact, Epstein's double, not Epstein himself. In short, it's just a real mess over there. And Clinton flew on Epstein's plane. Who exactly visited Astorana hasn't been proven to have participated in any of those. Well, in general, it's a nightmare, the worst kind, all the way up to members of the royal family. All in all, Donald Trump should be worried having an enemy like Elon Musk with such resources is, frankly, a huge, huge problem. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. In a few episodes, there will be another interesting case that could also cost Donald Trump his position. Meanwhile, Keith Kellogg's daughter openly reached out to him on Elon Musk's social network X after this latest nighttime Russian attack. And she wrote, "Loud night in Kiev, Dad. I have a strange feeling that the Russians don't want peace," she wrote. "Several Ukrainian cities have come under attack. Russia wants you to believe it is retaliating, but Ukraine's precision strikes were carried out in response to relentless Russian attacks on civilians, and only after Putin refused a ceasefire. He wants to keep waging war and seize all of Ukraine," wrote Meghan Mopes. Listen, she's the president of the RT Charitable Foundation and has actively and consistently supported Ukraine right from the very beginning. There should be more voices like hers. And I think, by the way, Keith Kellogg is actually quite reasonable in this regard. We know that if it weren't for Donald Trump, I think sanctions against the Russian Federation would have been imposed long ago. But I don't know, write in the comments that you actually believe there will come a moment when, even if Putin, I don't know, takes an entire major city tomorrow and just razes it to the ground, what will Trump say? Let's wait a bit longer, let them fight it out, let them. It's just like kids. And in general, let's move on to the next question. What do you think? I've already asked this question. I don't know. I haven't seen those answers. But if there are Trump supporters, if there are those who watch Trumpists, then write what the current arguments are for not imposing these sanctions. Meanwhile, Moscow has prepared to announce drone threats on public transport. Special video clips will be broadcast on buses, the metro and electric buses, warning about possible drone attacks. So they show the test video there. It will say, "Attention everyone, danger of a UAV attack. Please proceed to the nearest shelter." At the same time, there will be a map showing which direction to run. And I didn't bring up this news for no reason. The capital of a nuclear state is preparing for a daily reality of drones. In other words, the war is already knocking on the doors of the metro, buses, and Moscow homes. Who brought it here by the hand? Who did? Who made it so that drones are now everyday reality in Moscow where to run, and those video clips and all that? And people somehow get used to it. That is, Russians will think, well, it's those damned Ukro-Nazis. What can we do? They're the ones launching them, and there's nothing we can do about it. So this is already a new level of adaptation to war. After that, there could simply be a complete militarization of everyday life. You see how it happens gradually, step by step, but of course with the ones to blame, obviously. At the end of the program, specifically in the segment where I was having a conversation with ChatGPT about the touch of decay, there will be an interesting and thought-provoking momenta kind of monologue address that Russian viewers and listeners are highly encouraged to pay close attention to and listen to carefully. And as I've already said, Ukraine will not be left alone to face the Russians, and there will be support from Western countries and from the United Kingdom. I recently spoke about 100,000 drones. And for all these 100,000 drones to find their rightful, I emphasize, targets, they need to have a large number of operators. That's why I continue to raise funds for our good old friends for the Global Drone Academy, which has already trained more than 6,500 UAV operators so far of all kinds, assault, FPV, reconnaissance, and many others. And they are still continuing to train people now. A new consolidated group has just joined, so they need consumables. A lot of things are needed, but the fundraising link is in the description of this video. There you'll also find the Academy's card, the card number. If you're not watching on my channel, here's a QR code. You can use it to go straight to the Academy's bank account, for which I am always immensely grateful. There are words of gratitude from the Global Drone Academy, and even more so from those units that receive highly skilled UAV operators. This is modern warfare now. Putin has demanded restrictions on the use of foreign words. Well, there aren't any other problems left, right? Putin called for a more active fight against foreign words in order to protect the Russian language. It is fundamentally important to get rid of vulgar, mechanical foreign borrowings that do not enrich, but on the contrary pollute and distort our language. Also, probably that's what Putin did. In general, he stated, also warned that the authorities have serious work ahead of them. And it was precisely for the sake of this segment that I picked up this news. Look, the authorities have serious work ahead of them to strengthen the position of the Russian language and the significance of Russia in the global humanitarian space. Oh my, oh my, oh my, look at that. The significance needs to be strengthened and the language needs to be reinforced in the global humanitarian space. Now that's an immediate signal, an instant reason to shut down Russian cultural centers, throw those agents out of the country by the scruff of the neck, or else they'll soon start strengthening Russia's position and significance for you. And I think everyone knows exactly how they go about doing that. Second question, or rather, a bonus question. So what exactly is it that Putin's Russia, or more precisely, Russia during his rule, is remembered for and distinguished by? And name a few achievements specific to this Russia. I mean, not just when they were finishing off the remnants of former luxury, everything that was left to them after the Soviet Union. Well, of course, the fight against Anglicisms, that's definitely one. When everything is on fire, you have to deal with these words. By the way, after the attack on the long-range aviation airfields, after the very successful web operation, Putin, met with Lvova Belova, who was wrapped up in some kind of gel, in some scarves and something else. And, he started fighting Anglicisms. So really, what questions could there be against Anglicisms, against the West, against everything foreign? But, in the age of VPNs and TikTok, this just looks ridiculous. But if you're going to reject everything Western, then reject everything. Otherwise, how is it that you can't use the word iPhone, but you can use the iPhone itself? How does that make sense? No, that won't do. So you have to ban everything. The same goes for the auto industry, for Western brands. That's a direct contribution to LGBT. What's going on with you, Russians? Have you lost all your traditional values or what? Or what's going on? And now here comes that very segment about, by the way, today's episode might seem a bit unusual, a bit out of the ordinary. That happens when you have a night like this. Once again, Putin has shown how can you imagine. Just think about it. One old man calls another. They broke my triad. Can I hit them back? And Trump, ooh, I'm the president of a great nation. Well, let the old man go ahead and strike. What? What kind of politicians are these? Here comes that very segment about life has become better, life has become more fun, and about training ChatGPT. Recently we've had, well, how should I put it? You can't really call it discussion. Basically, I say something to it, give it some materials, ask it to analyze and draw conclusions, and then I make corrections. So you could say that I'm teaching it. And we had a discussion about which mythical or fictional characters Putin embodies those who bring death, decay, oblivion, some kind of darkness, who drain all life. Oh, and to start with, the AI suggested several options for what to call this character. Let me remind you, I was creating him for a certain scenario. So I'm not saying that this is Putin, no, it's for a certain scenario, but he has these kinds of traits. So 3 options. I took them and will work with them. Skorotlen, soon decay, Gnilovlad, rotten ruler, and Tiko Mor, silent death, that is, everything's always quiet, dying, fading away. Appearance. It's impossible to describe him precisely. It's as if he has a face, but you forget it immediately after seeing it. He suggested this to me already in the course of our certain discussions. Or was it she? I don't know. His body is an eternally shifting cloak of black mist and dry, crackling roots, through which you can glimpse at times a corpse, at times gold, at times pale skin. Pretty cool, right? I can already picture it in my mind. He even drew all of this later. But I won't show the drawings. He infiltrates, penetrates, spreads like mold on an old wall. He doesn't build, he absorbs and preserves. His methods, his touch, turn people into faceless, emotionless, willless beings. He knows how to alter memories, and yesterday's hero becomes an enemy. Where is he? Where does he dwell? In cities where no one smiles, where children are unhappy, young people are afraid to speak, and posters with the faces of dead leaders hang like icons. Oh, pretty cool, right?